Welcome to the Fall Play YouTube channel.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Dr. Silkman, and welcome, beautiful people. Welcome to Coffee with Foul Play. And the title of our podcast today is appropriately titled, Let's Bring Them Home. And guys, welcome to the podcast. Our regular researchers that will be appearing today on the podcast are Bibi, Big Jeff, Kelly, Christy, Millbilly, and Obi-Wan. Monitoring the chat, fielding your questions, and please keep the questions coming. They're excellent. We're really happy with the interaction. Monitoring the chat today will be Sammy and Zoe. And guys, I'd like to introduce our two special guest researchers today, JJax61, and Maz, who's from the UK. Welcome, guys. We're so happy that you can be here with us on our podcast. And we all like to say how thankful we are for all your support. I mean, guys, we have managed recently 841 subscribers, and that's just simply awesome. And our channel itself has had over 220,000 views. So that's awesome. And we thank you very much, guys. And as you know, Zoe and also Christy have been working very, very hard on the phone calls. And we have, I believe, uploaded 1,372 phone calls so far. And I believe there's going to be even more coming, and we'll get them uploaded on the Foul Play server. And Christy, as you know, has done some superb analysis on those phone calls, and they have revealed quite a lot. And these are the phone calls involving Stephen talking with members of his family and other members as well. And we get a behind the scenes, so to speak, aspect of what happened in that family. And I think you'll all agree that it's been very, very tragic, and there's been a lot of tension in the family, and they're all at each other's throats. And I reckon that's precisely what the MTSO were after, that, you know, the family was literally tearing themselves apart. So please, if you have some time, have a listen to some of those phone calls. And of course, we also thank Christy for her superb effort that she's done so far on those phone calls. Also, I'd like to add that Millbilly, please check out his excellent YouTube channel as well. He's done a lot of excellent analysis on the photographs, the recently released photographs, a lot of the events on Kratz Road, as well as the police chatter of the law enforcement officers at that critical time. So please check out Millbilly's excellent YouTube channel. Well, welcome, guys. We have, of course, been very busy on the Foul Play team. We've done a lot of work, and some of the excellent work that has been done. We've done a Thirsty for Theory Thursday. Thank God I got that one out. The Magic Bullet. And we had Andrew Whitehead appear as a guest, and he's doing a superb job. A young researcher, very enthusiastic, very knowledgeable. And guys, we urge everyone to go check out his channel, Andrew Whitehead's channel. He's done a lot of excellent work, and he recently was a guest, and they talked about the Magic Bullet, Item FL. Superb work. Both Christy and I, we've gone to confession. We've had our therapy sessions. We did a we did a 2 videos on chats with Linda Kay listening regarding Ken Kratz's book, and we have both survived. We've done 2 parts, and both Christy and myself, we did an analysis of Sweaty Boy's book, and we pulled no punches. We told it as it was. And of course, do not buy that book under any circumstances at all. And Christy has been very, very kind. I don't know how she's done it, but she's actually done a reading of the book. And Christy, you've now read this book, what, 8 times, Christy?
It's 7 or 8 from
Oh, my Lord. Oh,
and then
my Lord.
and not to mention the numerous times just going and finding certain clips to use for something else that we're researching or something. So yes, I believe it's 7 times cover to cover at this point.
All right. I don't know how you do it, Christy. I've read it about 4 times. That's enough. That's enough. Now, Christy, do you have an announcement you want to make before we actually commence the podcast?
I do. I want everybody to be on the lookout. We had a great idea, and Spooky and Zoe have been working very, very hard. We have a website coming out. Hopefully, it's going to be your one-stop shop. We're going to link all the YouTube channels, Andrew's, Millbillies, Linda's, Myers. I can't think of who else off the top of my head. All the queso pictures, all the files. It's going to be just a one-stop shop for everything you're looking for. It's also going to have a link to our Discord channel. As soon as you get to the website, you can see who's online at Discord and who's in the call, and you'll be able to see everything we're doing, and we're really excited about it. It's coming along nicely. I want to thank Zoe and Spooky so much for making this come to light. It was seriously just a crazy idea. We started talking, and 20 minutes later, we were building it. So thank you, girls, very, very much for your help, and everybody else, be on the lookout. It'll be coming soon.
Wow. Awesome. Awesome. Look, thank you guys. Look, it's been a real privilege to be part of this team. And we're all of us. Don't forget, it's not just Foul Play. It's all of the excellent people in many different channels throughout the world, all working towards a single cause. And like I said, let's bring those boys home so they can hug their mamas. All right, guys. Well, welcome. Well, what we'll do, we'll make a start of the podcast proper. And last time what we did is that we had finished on slide 203. And this is, of course, the infamous phone call that Brendan made to his mum. And Christy revealed through her analysis and also from the book that we read, Ken Kratz's book, Ken Kratz was listening to all the phone calls. He was building up a profile of everyone. And there's no doubt that they were keenly listening in to the phone calls involving Brendan to his mother. And so much so that they actually used Brendan's own words to his mum, and they played it in court. And of course, it looked really bad because it appeared that Brendan was making an admission that he was involved somehow in these alleged crimes against Teresa Halbach with his uncle, Stephen Avery, and it looked pretty bad. But when you realize that Brendan, he himself was a person with low IQ, unfortunately, not the sharpest tool in the shed. Some of the words he said were obviously being misconstrued. However, for the state, they utilized that testimony as an admission. And of course, Brendan later recanted. He didn't really mean certain things in that call. But the take-home message here was that clearly the state was listening into the calls and utilizing those words against Brendan, right? And Ken Kratz in his book stated that they listened to all of them, right? And they were building a profile of Brendan, a profile of Stephen. And it's very, very interesting. Yeah, it was very, very heartbreaking to hear the way the state utilized those words. Panel, do you have any comments about slide 203? I mean, clearly it was very, very heartbreaking. guys. Big Jeff, do you have any comments?
I do. It was this was the call, the so-called confession that he was a second time coerced into making, correct? Where they said, well, you have to tell your mom, or we can't help you do anything.
Correct.
And
Correct.
and he once again confessed without confessing. Some of it, without being able to articulate one single thing that he did, because he felt he had to. It's like, yeah, I did something.
Yeah. He
and,
did.
And that's the way I take that phone call.
Yeah, he did. He said he did some of it. Well, I mean, that could be interpreted that, yes, he went to his uncle to tend to the fire, or he had helped cleaned up the garage. But of course, the state utilized those words in a nefarious manner. And it's really disgraceful because both Fassbender and Wiegert set him up. And we all know that O'Kelly apparently was watching on through a two-way mirror, never entered into the room. J-Jax, do you have a comment?
I was just going to add to what you said and what Big Joe said, is that anyone that's watched the May 13th interrogation with Brendan Fassbender and Wiegert, it didn't go at all like they thought it was going to go. And
no.
It really went sideways for him. So, the threats really began. I say threats; they were subtle, but it was there nonetheless. To a 16-year-old kid, you got a cop saying, "Hey, you going to tell your mom? Well, I'm going to call her tomorrow. Don't you think you should call her sooner? Well, or tonight or whatever. You want me to tell her? You want to tell her you're lying? He was goaded into calling his mom and saying whatever.
Correct.
You could tell that.
Correct. There's no doubt. Unfortunately, Brendan did get set up. And when you think he had really no legal representations at all, Kaczynski was not present. And of course, he later got sacked as a result of that. But to think, we all know now, if you read the 2010 post-conviction hearings, and J-Jax, I know that you have, it's really very bad and very telling how Kaczynski, O'Kelly, they were working hand in hand with Ken Kratz and the investigators. And they were passing on information about their client, about Stephen, directly to Ken Kratz and the investigators. And Ken Kratz had to admit he was being CC'd into all the emails. So, J-Jax, do you want to comment anything about that, the 2010 post-conviction hearings?
I would recommend anyone that hasn't read them, read the entire thing. I mean, there's interesting aspects to, from the Kratz says and Kaczynski and O'Kelly, but you really should read the whole thing because it also gets into not only it's obvious if you read through it, it's clear that, it's hard to figure out without doing a little speculating because we don't know for positive, but it's clear that this meeting that O'Kelly set up and Kaczynski on Brendan on May 12th, this was planned. This was pre-planned.
Correct.
At minimum, a week prior. It could have been longer. I can't really drive it down any further than that, though. He admits it.
Yes.
So once I'm not sure how they knew that Locke was going to, kind of deliver this devastating news that that his confession wasn't going to get thrown out. Whatever, it doesn't matter. It was still a setup.
It was a setup. Yeah,
so,
there's no doubt.
But adding to all of that, this dives into much further into what they did to him. And then if you go even further and read his new counsel, Fremgen and Adelstein, what they did, especially Adelstein, he screwed Brendan royally, and Fremgen said he didn't know that he was going to do that, and maybe he didn't. I don't know, but he screwed Brendan almost as bad as Kaczynski did, from a
Yeah.
lawyer standpoint. So
Yeah.
I would recommend to everyone read through all of it. It's crazy. It's insane. And Fox screwed up. He should have fixed the issue right then.
Correct. And these, thank you, J Jax. These are things that, of course, during the trial, no one knew about. These were elements that were working against Brendan in the background. And when your own legal team comes in with a strategic plan, that strategic plan was very, very simple. They believed that Stephen was evil incarnate, and Kaczynski even said it during a news report. And don't forget, guys, I was shocked. He made this comment before he even met Brendan. So here's the defense attorney making a comment on national TV before even going over the case with his own client. So the plan was very, very obvious. They believe that Brendan partook in these crimes against Teresa Halbach with his uncle. So their plan was, okay, let's see if we can get Brendan to confess. And the plan was very, very straightforward. They were all working together to get Brendan to write down a written confession and also to get it Mirandaized and on videotape. And they were going to use that against Brendan in a trial and then use Brendan to testify against his own uncle. Ken Kratz was very frustrated with the March 1st interrogation because it went for too long, right, J Jax? He was not impressed that it went for over 4 hours. J Jax, do you want to make a comment about that?
Absolutely. I mean, you get so frustrated with these guys. I can't. I almost can't talk because I get so irritated.
Yes. Thank you, J Jax. Christy, do you have a comment?
It just tongue ties us right away. It's happened numerous times. I totally feel you, J Jax. Tongue tied.
Yeah. Thank you, Christy. You're right. Billy, do you have a comment?
Well, what they did to Brendan more solidifies the fact that Stephen Avery was framed.
Oh, no doubt. I completely agree. I was J Jax, do you have a comment?
Just to add to this and to what Millbilly said, if you think about the entire process, without Brendan, there is no trial with Stephen. It doesn't happen because Kratz knew he had to have a witness that placed Stephen in these places. So without him, it doesn't work. It can't. Well, I mean, it can happen, but there's just no way. Their case was so weak, and he damn well knew it, and he knew it early on.
Yes, so. Correct. Thank you, J Jax. Look, there's no doubt, and even Ken Kratz admitted the case against Stephen was purely circumstantial. And look, potentially Stephen could have easily explained away what his blood was doing in the RAV, what even his sweat DNA, his touch DNA under the hood, and even the key. He could have given some type of story, but he never did, right? Because he didn't do any of these things. But he could have come up with a reasonable excuse. Ken Kratz knew that the story, the whole case against Stephen was very, very flimsy. So he needed a star witness, and that star witness, of course, was Brendan, right? So the way they set up, Millbilly.
There's also Stephen Avery's alibi.
Correct. So you had this dual thing happening, right? Stephen could have said, hey, look, my nephew was over. He tended the fire with me. He came over and we cleaned up part of the yard. We lit a small fire. We got rid of some rubbish. He helped me clean the garage, and that was it. Everyone went home, and that was the end of it. J-Jax, do you have a comment?
And how many other people, family members, and even surrounding that they use or that they try to turn against Stephen, and really the only one that really flipped, that really mattered. I mean, they really worked on Jody hard, but was Brendan. He's the one. He was the
Correct.
key because he was the alibi witness.
Correct. Yes, you're right. Big Jeff, do you have a comment?
Yeah, just real fast. The confession of Brendan leads to the search of the garage, and we all know what Ken Kratz said about item FL in his book, didn't we? Don't we? We talked about how weak his case was. They find item FL, and Kratz identifies it in his book as the game changer.
Well, it's the game changer. Yep, there's no doubt about it, and we've discussed it many times. He needed a link. He definitely needed a link to what allegedly happened to Teresa Horbach. Sammy, do you have a question?
Yeah, we have Shira on here commenting. She said, way too much reasonable doubt. Even without the ending of Brandon's coercion, how could the jury not have that doubt, or did they?
Well, remember, 7 of the jurors initially said not guilty. 7. And I think there was 1 or 2 who were not decided, and 3 said guilty. Now,
Right.
those 3 who said guilty could have definitely been plants, because something must have happened during the deliberation to flip those 7 that said not guilty, right? And that's with all the so-called damning evidence. So if you could imagine if Brendan's testimony had been tossed out, I reckon that Stephen would have walked. Big Jeff, do you have any comments?
I do. You can go search. The commenter is 100% correct. You can go search for the clips on Good Morning America of Moira Demos. It might have been the Today Show. I can't remember which. Moira and her name's Laura.
Laura.
Where they had been in touch with jurors clearly trading votes, and the jurors had, many of the jurors thought they were innocent. They felt like they'd been threatened, and they felt like if they exonerated Stephen on the mutilation of a corpse, that somehow that would trigger a retrial, and that was their way out. And they're obviously misinformed on that. But they told this to Laura and Moira. So I mean, you can see that clip on the, I don't know that's been investigated, but vote trading on the jury is not legal in this.
Yeah. Thank you, Big Jeff. Sammy, do you have a comment?
I have one more from another person on the chat, and it's My Urban Dictionary. And they said they hit the trifactor with Brandon. Michael Kelly said it. Get rid of the entire bloodline. They discredited the whole family as corrupt by taking Brendan down with Steve.
Correct. Yeah, there's no doubt. They had it's disgusting because, like I said, if you read the post-conviction hearings, the 2010 post-conviction hearings, it's unbelievable that Kaczynski and O'Kelly, at least those 2, openly admitted what they were doing. And they had a key plan, and that plan was to go for a plea bargain, as in, okay, you testify against your own uncle, you tell the jury, the court, exactly what took place. We're going to get together, we're going to come up with a plea deal, you'll be out in 15 years. Because they kept on saying to him, do you want to be in prison forever? Do you want to start a family? So they seeded in his mind that concept. J-Jax, do you have a comment?
Thinking about what you just said there, but let's think about these recordings that Fallon played during the trial.
Yes.
And they left out that part where Barb came in. and
Correct.
he
Correct.
he immediately started recanting. And
Correct.
Uyghur and Fassbender damn near tore the door off to him just getting back in that room when they saw what was going on, because they were watching, you know.
Oh yes.
So
Oh yes.
they knew immediately what they had done, and got him to say, damn.
Yes. Yeah, that. Well, the amazing thing is, J-Jax, was that apparently the defense agreed to stop the tape
And I
at
don't
that point.
understand that. I don't understand that. I don't know how that Fallon, Kratz, and Gahn got Fremgen and Edelstein to agree. And I don't care how long it was. It was just another 20, 30 minutes, whatever the hell it was.
Correct.
I don't understand how that happened.
Yeah, that actually was a big mistake. Because you only got to hear the so-called confession parts. Now, of course, I know that his defense team tried to debunk everything that Brendan said, but obviously clearly did not work very well at all. But had they played that last part, it would have at least seeded some doubt in their mind. So the way the state approached it was they literally took the words from Brendan to say, look, okay, he's now admitting his guilt. You can see that, guys, right? He's now admitting his guilt. J-Jax, do you have a comment?
So, you know, this stuff came to light, or I should say these recordings, at least part of it, was when Kaczynski was his lawyer. And of course, Fox made the mistake of not throwing all of that out when he threw
Yes.
Kaczynski out on his ass and kicked him to the curb. All that stuff should have went away, all of it. Now,
Correct.
now March 1st, he wasn't represented by anyone, so you know that's a bit of a gray area. But you know, if they were going to play it, it should have been played in its entirety.
That's correct. And like I said, J-Jax, and you'll back me up, Ken Kratz wanted to do that. I think it was the May 12th interview with both Fassbender and Wiegert. Basically, what they wanted from Brendan was a nice, neat admission, a nice, neat
Plain confession.
Yeah, yeah. So it's basically a one-page confession, a one-page summary. They present that to the court. They present it to the jury. They present Brendan to testify as a star witness. They then do a plea deal. Okay, Brendan, you're the star witness for the state. We're going to agree to go light on you and give you 15 years. So you spend 15 years in prison, but then you're out. And this, of course, would have had a devastating effect not only on Stephen, but also on Brendan, because you may be released in 15 years, but you carry that title of being a rapist, a murderer. You know, that's not exactly what I call freedom. You're going to carry that burden forever. And especially if you haven't actually committed any of those crimes, that's a high price to pay. And it's amazing how Ken Kratz, Christy will back me up, in his book, blames the grandfather, blames the parents by saying, okay, Alan Avery said, don't you dare go for a plea deal, because, of course, the plea deal would have hurt both of them. Christy, do you have any comments about that?
No, you're 100% correct. He makes it a point to bring up that not only is it Alan's fault, but that is the only time Alan talks to his grandson.
Yes, yes. Now, we all know, right? The Avery family has been through this previously with the Penny Bernstein case. So if Brendan played ball, it really would have been very, very devastating. And unfortunately, in that, I think it was the May 12th interview, it was a disaster for the state, because he didn't give a nice, neat summary. In fact, Brendan started recanting. All his comments were inconsistent with one another. They were clashing. They made no sense. he was recanting. One sentence, he would say one thing. When questioned again, he would say the absolute opposite. So quite clearly, the strategy for the state fell apart. And not only that, Kaczynski got sacked because he didn't represent his own client. J. Jax, do you have any comments about that?
Well, I think that, looking at what Kratz wanted, and he knew, like I said a few minutes ago, he knew early on they had to, and I think back to early in November. I mean, they knew way back then that Brendan had said that he was with, Steve on the night of the 31st, but that didn't really seem to matter back then. You have to wonder why that was. So, looking through the next several months, and Stephen's going through, or his lawyers are going through his civil stuff, because that got pushed to the side, but still, it was still alive. It wasn't dead. And then they settle, in the middle of February. If you notice, anyone that's read this stuff, if you notice, as soon as they settle that lawsuit, they go after Brendan almost immediately.
Yes, because they got the civil suit out of the way. The MTSO were no longer responsible, and so they had clear passage. Millbilly, do you have a comment?
Well, they talked to Jody, and then when they're about to leave her, they say, okay, she's got some things she might want to talk to us about. Gave her a phone card. Well,
Correct.
After they leave, Jody tells them, don't let them back here. I do not want to talk to them no more.
Yes.
And she's about to be released. So they had no other choice but to go after her.
Yes. And around that time, we have Kayla, who went to see the student counselor. And it was Kayla who mentioned about the fact that her cousin, he was crying, he lost a lot of weight, he was worried. And that was an entry point for the investigators to shine the spotlight directly on Brendan. And then that's their main focus was Brendan. Okay. Then you had the police interview with Detective O'Neill, and O'Neill thought that Brendan was holding things back, and then it all went downhill from that point on. J. Jax, do you have a comment?
I think that, of course, we kind of have to take a little bit of a leap here, but I don't think it's really that far of a leap. And I've said it many times that I think that during this entire time, and especially, I don't know, starting probably middle of November on up until through January and February, I think Candy Avery pushed this. I think Candy Avery is almost as much responsible for Brendan being in prison as his mother. And I say that because she didn't care how she got to Stephen, period. And anyone that's read anything about this knows, when they come to search the house and Candy's there and Earl goes flying and hiding under a pile of clothes, and she says, "Oh, he's not here," but that son of a bitch was there hiding. I mean, what is she? So I think Candy, and of course she never testifies, but we get bits and pieces throughout this whole thing. She's involved,
and she lets the investigators talk to her kids.
Yep,
you hear Kayla say that. It comes right out of Kayla's mouth. They talk to her at home, trying to get her to say, you have to remember. You need to remember. And they're talking about things that happened on October 31st and the day that they were at that party where she claims Brendan was acting funny.
Correct. That's right. That he had lost all this weight and was very worried and concerned. Big Jeff, do you have a comment?
I do. I just like to toss in with all the other things that have been thrown out about Brendan, which are all correct. That we can't also forget that around the time of first prior to the time of March 2nd, Stephen Avery is on the cusp of being let out on the property bond.
Yes.
And there are several of us who believe that that was an oh crap moment for the state, and that Brendan, for all practical purposes, was the state's last best Hail Mary.
Well,
because
they
needed to do something right.
They were
Yes.
trying to find anything else they could charge him with. That's why they went after Marie. Didn't work. Then they're talking to Jody. What are they talking about? They're talking about this blazer fire.
Correct.
And then they bring up Marie. That doesn't pan out. So then what do? They go right after Brendan.
Yes.
That's the nail in the coffin.
Correct. Bibi, do you have a comment?
Last ditch effort, get Steve Avery at our class.
Yeah. There's no question. Thank you, Bibi. Obi-Wan, do you have a comment?
Yeah, it kind of gave me the impression that this was their way to get Avery in the beginning. This was the original plan, and that it was because the issue with Teresa, obviously came up and looked more like this was their shot, to capitalize on it. So I believe it was abandoned, and I believe that if he was somehow exonerated, this probably would be an issue, and they would probably end up pursuing it as well. They would end up picking it back up because it's still very much active, isn't it?
Oh,
it's not like closed.
There's no doubt. I mean, there's no doubt. There's a lot of unknowns in this case, and we've discussed it many times here and also on the TTTs. We still don't know the identity of those bones, right? When you think about it, back then you needed 15 loci before you can make a claim that the remains actually belong to a specific person. And now the FBI demands 20. Well, Kathleen Zellner wanted to test those cremains, right, to actually definitively show whose cremains they belong to. Are they Teresa's? Are they somebody else's? And we know that the state gave back the bones. So that avenue is closed. I still believe that the state is still very, very nervous about this case. It's hiding, in my opinion, I know I'm speculating, it's hiding something really big, really important. Because of, you can see the way the state has attacked Kathleen Zellner and has put up roadblocks at all opportunities. The state was very fortunate that they found the weakest link in the chain. That weakest link was Brendan. And Jay Jacks will back me up on this. They were also, especially Kaczynski and Kratz, were very, very worried about Barb and her attitude. She was very, very volatile. And during the 2010 post-conviction hearings, they actually ruled that Barb was not to appear in the courtroom when Fassbender and Wiegert were testifying, right? And they agreed to it. They didn't want her to be present there. Obviously, she may have said some inappropriate comments or whatever, or she could have made comments to the press about what Fassbender and Wiegert were saying. And even in the book, Christy will back me up on this, Ken Kratz didn't want Barb to represent her son because Barb would have just simply said, go away, guys. Christy, do you have a comment?
As a matter of fact, in that whole paragraph, he talks about how it goes against every fiber of his being to interview a child without the proper representation, be it a lawyer or parent present. And then before the sentence is even over, he talks about how he hoped Barb wouldn't be there, how he'd hoped Barb would agree not to go. So which is it?
Correct.
You don't want to do it, or you hope that she, which is it? I mean, he's a walking contradiction. And
correct.
He was praying that Barbara would say no, she didn't want to be there, and he lucked out.
Correct. Yeah, he was. They were very, very fortunate. Sammy, do you have a comment?
Ashera is saying, I think that we're planning once he started the lawsuit. I really don't think it was an opportunity they used. Still, I can't understand what was trying to start when Barb's vehicle was burned.
Yeah, that's a really good question because, as Millbilly said, they kept on questioning Jody about that 2004 fire, and you're thinking, I think it was 2004. Correct me if I'm wrong, Millbilly, but you just wondered why Wiegert was going there. Jay Jax, do you have a comment?
Talking about Barb, and I don't want to take a huge leap of faith here, but everyone's seen the footage of the end of the Brendan's trial when Barb went ballistic. She wasn't sad. She wasn't crying. Well, she may have been anger crying, but she wasn't boo-hooing she was nuclear raging mad.
Oh, yes.
So,
Yeah.
so was she expecting, was she told that there was going to be something different happen? And I don't know that. I don't want to put no words anywhere. It's just looking at her actions, her direct actions, when that verdict is read, and she went freaking insane with anger. She was red hot.
Yes, correct. In actual fact, she made the comment that she actually had blamed the Hallbucks.
Get in her car. She says, what I think happened? I think the Hallbucks are behind all this.
Correct.
They set this whole thing up.
Correct. Yeah, that was remarkable. Bibi, do you have a comment?
Doesn't in her like closing statement or her statement to the judge or whatever, doesn't she make some comment about that she knows he may be a little bit guilty for part of some of this, but he shouldn't get all that much time also?
Yes, that's the impression I got as well. Well, you see, things fell apart, right? Because Brenda didn't play ball. So because he recanted in court, they actually couldn't use him as a star witness. And not only that, Christy will back me up in this. Ken Kratz says we didn't use any of Brendan's statements to against Stephen. Stephen, they used the forensic evidence against him, right? So they didn't use anything that Brendan said. But we know the March 2nd press conference and how damaging that was. Millbilly.
Steve's attorneys had multiple opportunities to potentially bring Brendan into the situation in his court, but they chose not to.
Yes, they did. Yeah. Brendan didn't appear in Stephen's trial. Stephen didn't appear in Brendan's trial. They kept it completely separate. Big Jeff, do you have a comment?
I do. Kratz would have had to stick to one story instead of two to convict Stephen and Brendan if he had used Brendan's statements. So, I mean, that actually helped Kratz.
Correct. Like I said, this was actually potentially a very difficult situation for the state because you have forensic evidence against Stephen, but you have no forensic evidence against Brendan. So, in effect, they had to treat it as two separate trials. They had to go down the route of forensic evidence against Stephen. And mind you, Ken Kratz admitted he didn't want to do that. He didn't want to go down the long, winding road of using forensic evidence because it is highly subjective. You can dispute it. You can come up with an alternative theory, hypothesis. So it's much harder to defend. The problem was Brendan didn't play ball, right? So he didn't give a clean confession, which means that Ken Kratz had to separate the cases. He couldn't use Stephen against Brendan, so he kept them separate. And it's rather bizarre, and we've discussed it, how Stephen was found by a jury not guilty of basically destroying a corpse, right? And yet Brendan was found guilty of that charge, right? Mutilation of a corpse, which is really, really bizarre. Sammy, do you have a comment?
Yes, I just wanted to pipe in since you were on this topic. Neverly was saying, I think they kept Stephen and Brendan's trials separate because they're afraid of future appeals. If one gets off, the other one would too.
Look, thank you, Neverly, for the question. Yeah, that's probably very, very likely. Jay Jax, do you have a comment?
If you look at how, after Brendan was arrested, they don't really put it in any kind of court documentation, but for all intents and purposes, Brendan and Steve were treated as co-defendants, period.
Right. Yep. Yep. Millbilly, thank you, Jay Jax. Millbilly, do you have a comment?
Well, when they're talking to Jody, they're telling her, we know Stephen did this by himself. We know he did this. So
correct.
After she won't cooperate, why is there now suddenly two people partaking?
Correct. And, that's exactly what Ken Kratz said in the trial. This was the result of one person. Sammy, do you have a comment?
Yeah, Travis Williamson on here is saying that the defense are the ones who have the option of a separate trial.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they treated it as separate trials. The strategy that Ken Kratz, Kaczynski, and O'Kelly came up with failed. So in effect, they had no other option but to go for separate trials.
Do you think that maybe it maybe has more to do with the fact that, like, by separating the trials, each, like, the defending lawyer would actually be trying to protect their client from the other person's trial, maybe?
Yes. They did keep it separate, because I remember Fremgen kept on saying to the jury and the judge, well, this is Brendan's trial. He kept on emphasizing Brendan. This is not Stephen Avery's trial. And Fremgen even admitted, look, there is forensic and scientific evidence against Stephen that can be argued, but Fremgen, he eloquently put, he goes, there's absolutely nothing against my client to put him there, to put him at the crime scene. So that was the approach that his defense team took, that, hey, look, there's nothing linking him to the crime. Stephen is separate, and that's the way they approached it.
Thank you.
Oh, no problems at all. So, guys, are we happy with slide 203? We can progress? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, guys. All right, now we can bring in our good friend Kelly, because believe it or not, the unbelievable situation happened. And let me just introduce her. Okay, now this was after the trial, of course. There was some investigation that was being done. And this reporter approached Ken Kratz regarding that he had information about sexting, a sexting scandal involving Ken Kratz, in which Ken Kratz was being accused of sexting specific women. And these women were all part of a domestic violence, right? And I'll just read it out here for the audience. Ken Kratz, when he was approached by Foley, was very, very surprised. He acted as though he got caught out of the blue. And Ken Kratz said to him, to Foley, this is a non-news story, okay? He clearly wanted to trivialize it. This is the sexting scandal. And Foley said, why are you so worried about the story getting out there if there's nothing there, right? So on the one hand, Ken Kratz was more than happy to destroy people's reputation without any evidence at all, especially when he gave the March 2nd press conference, and yet the tables were being turned on the DA. The tables were being turned. And of course, what Ryan Foley did was he published the article. This is involving the sexting scandal. And it took off big time, right? And here you can see a photograph of one of the victims who came forward. She was brave enough to report what Ken Kratz did. Now, Kelly, can you fill us in anything about our good friend Ken Kratz?
Oh, he's a pig. So recently, well, a little while back now, I actually reached out to him on Twitter.
Nancy Drew.
I'm Nancy Drew. So I reached out to him just like a lot of women have, even guys have sent him a message, a private message. I honestly did not expect him to message back. It was random. I just pretty much spilled my guts. I was being respectful, but then I was also being a bit cheeky by like just telling him exactly how I felt in very colourful Australian ways. And I woke up the next morning and I had a message from him, and from there it kind of took off. He started by deflecting everything I was saying, so he would always answer a question with another question, never really got to the point.
Of course.
And then it kind of took a little bit of a twist. So I thought, instead of doing what everyone else was usually doing and always was constantly asking him questions, I then decided to ask him if he wanted to ask me any questions. And that's when he took his opportunity to turn it around and bring up his sexing scandal himself. So he wanted to know from me, after everything I had researched about him, what was my understanding about his case from the 2009 sexing scandal with his victims, and how he was interested in how I portrayed him.
Wow.
So from there, I pretty much said that I was happy to answer his question, and I pretty much just said, you know, although it didn't affect me, you know, what he did.
Yes.
I did think it was a little bit disrespectful. I said had a job to do. You crossed the line, and he sent back, and he actually said, "Thank you for your thoughtful response." He thanked me, and then it kind of went on a little bit more. We kind of went back to the case, and then his one rule then became that he would answer my questions on one understanding, and that was that at any stage throughout our conversation, we were allowed to return back and talk about his sexing again.
Oh my God.
So he wanted to keep going back to that.
To the sexting.
So we can't. Yeah, he wanted to keep going back. He said at any stage there was one rule, and that was at any stage he was allowed to bring it back up, and we could go back to that conversation. I agreed, and it kind of went from there. From there was one question at a time, again deflecting everything we kept saying. I would ask him, he would give us a wholly different scenario. I asked him about whether he thinks KZ would ever get a new trial. He said not trial, but he did lean towards, there would be an evidential hearing. And then from there, he kind of went into wanting role play. I was now his little Nancy Drew. So from now on, he wanted to refer to me as Nancy and would only call me Nancy. And again, it kind of went back and forth. And then it turns out that he was also watching me a little bit closer than I thought. He had gone back and watched all my Twitter posts from the very beginning and saw all the Twitter posts I had wrote about him. And one morning I had woke up to a message saying, "Can you explain this?" And it was all like he had screenshotted all my posts that I wrote about him. And then he wrote on the lines, "Oh, nice group you're in, by the way, bye," and then blocked me.
Oh my.
Yeah, so he actually got offended that I had actually thought of him in that way. He thought we were making progress and that I shouldn't be thinking of him in that way. So he was really offended that I had called him a sweaty pig.
Oh my Lord.
They're saying you go, Kelly.
Oh my Lord. So you had an extreme
So from now on, I'm
close
little Nancy Drew.
you had an extreme close encounter with Sweaty Boy. Oh my
Yes.
Lord.
But I had I only referred to him as Kenneth. He liked the Kenneth. He didn't like Ken. It was Kenneth.
Kenneth. Oh my Lord. Obi-Wan, do you have any comment?
Yes. Did you kind of like get the sense like it was kind of he was engaging in like role playing or something like that in that type of manner?
I actually brought it up in one of I was actually being cheeky myself, and I actually said to him when he started going on about calling me Nancy Drew, I will admit, I said to him, "Oh, role play. Everyone loves a bit of role play." And he kind of like, he was like, no. You're just my Nancy. So he kind of tried to turn it into that it wasn't that, but he so was doing that.
Oh my God. Did he mention handcuffs? Pink
No.
handcuffs? Did he invite
No,
you to an autopsy?
No.
Oh my! But the important
No,
thing is, though, Kelly, did you have a cold shower afterwards?
I bathed in acid for a week.
Oh my Lord! Oh my Lord!
I felt that dirty.
Oh my Lord! I don't know how you did it. Obi-Wan, do you have a comment?
Well, you know how like Kratz says, he says that he's a changed man. He went through rehabilitation and did a lot of things to change his life around, and it just shows you the state of mind he's in currently, and he's still engaging in those type of behaviors. You know.
Yeah, there's no question about that. J Jax, do you have a quick comment?
Yeah, I think that you and I are probably close to the age of Kratz. I know I am. And I can tell you for a fact, he was creeping on her, period. He's being a creepy, dirty, old bastard.
Now tell us the bad things that J Jax that he did. Yeah, no, that did sound very, very creepy. Big Jeff, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I need a second. So this nice group of people you hang with, was he talking about your good friends on the Fall Play YouTube channel, Kelly? Is that who he was talking about?
I believe so. I actually believe so. I think he has been watching. I do believe that 110%.
Mr. Charles Darwin.
Mr. Charles
Darwin. I
Darwin.
want to find out
Mr. Charles Darwin.
who he likes better, Dr. Silkman or Millbilly. That's what I really like to know. I wonder if you could maybe send it back to see which is the more popular personality, so we know who to promote.
well, if I could just say the comment, you know that he had a YouTube channel, and he put up these disgusting, shocking videos. One of them, of course, involved Brendan Dassey when he called him the sacrificial lamb. And I wrote him this massive, massive response. Got deleted, didn't respond, but he then took down all his videos. Because again, and Christy will back me up on this, Ken Kratz rolled the dice. He got trashed after the trial, and after Man 1 came out, he really got trashed. He received a lot of hate mail, death threats, etc., etc. So he decided to write this book, and Christy and we reviewed the book. Christy, do you want to make any comments on why Ken Kratz wrote this book? What made him write this book?
It was his temper tantrum. That was his way of having his temper tantrum. He wanted everybody to say, Ken Kratz is great. He prosecuted Stephen Avery. He was mad that he was one of the most hated people in America right now.
Yes.
It wasn't fair. It wasn't fair. His prosecution of Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey was 100% above board, and he deserves the credit for it. and people should be praising him, not bashing him for it.
Correct. And he even said in his book, he said that the writing experience was not a good one. And really, in essence, he had a second bite of the cherry. He wanted to basically set the record straight. But the problem was his book actually inflamed people even more. It backfired. Millbilly, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I just posted the link in the chat for N64 Controller's YouTube channel. They uploaded the videos he deleted.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's brilliant. So yes, I think I've commented on all of his videos in a harsh manner, and so they should, but he never responded at all. Obi-Wan, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I just want to touch on back on Foley again. I thought he did a really good job holding his own, and when he was questioning Kratz kept sidestepping the questioning by simply stating that this was old news, as like people knew this stuff was going on with these sex cases, you know.
Yes.
And well, before and it was didn't happen quite some time before Avery's case.
Well, actually, it's surprising you bring that up, because he was on I forgot his name. The he was on with Jerome Buting. And I forgot the name of the guy who interviewed him. And Jerome Buting let it not. Dr. Phil. It was incredible, because you could see the icy stare that Buting was giving Ken Kratz, and they brought up the sexting scandal, and Buting let it slip. Oh yeah, but you also had accusations back in the 90s. And Ken Kratz said, no, that there was nothing to it, nothing came to it. So he was doing that type of lurid behavior back before the Stephen Avery case, right? Because don't forget, not saying that this is the case for everyone, he was in a rock band. He was the lead guitarist, right? And of course, you can imagine what he was trying to think, playing lead guitar. So, women, groupies, that would have all been part of the scene back then. Jay Jax, do you have any comments?
I can't remember the name of the city or county where he was working as an assistant prosecutor, but there were accusations that whatever happened, and he left there and went somewhere else. Millbilly may know which town that was, but it was in that mid eastern part of Wisconsin when he
was at Stevens Point.
That doesn't sound right. No,
okay. I
can't remember the name of it, but regardless,
yes.
Back to what Obi was talking about, Foley's interview. It to his credit, Kratz knew all this other information from a year prior.
Yes, he did.
He did. The DOJ, he made this deal with the DOJ, and he wanted to blame them for releasing this information, when in fact
Correct.
it had been void. Somebody had requested it, and they couldn't just outright deny it without some kind of reason, and they really didn't have a reason to deny it.
No. Well, thank you, Jay Jax. The disturbing thing is that this was information that Ken Kratz was trying to suppress from more than a year ago. So somehow it got out in the press, and Foley did a really, really good job to embarrass him. And the reason why Ken Kratz needed to be embarrassed was because let's think about it, guys. He painted Stephen Avery as this sexual monster, this sexual predator who was preying on young, innocent females. And lo and behold, Christy, take it away.
I think he was describing himself. It was like a diary entry. It wasn't about Stephen. All those horrible things he said were things that were about himself. He was the sexual predator. He was the one who abused women. It wasn't Stephen. It was him.
No. Correct. And like I said, both Christy and myself, we read the book from cover to cover multiple times. And it really was an embedded confession coming straight from Ken Kratz. He was living in a fantasy world. It wasn't Stephen Avery. Jay Jax, do you have a comment?
Just a quick one. Think about the time frame of all this happening in late summer, fall of 2010, and think about a year prior. Now, what's going on or fixing to happen? Brendan's 2010 motion hearing, which happened in January of 2010. So all this shit was going on, and the DOJ's letting him. To me, it boggles my mind that the DOJ knew what kind of person this guy was and allowed him to continue to participate as prosecutor in this. So that's just a thought. That's all.
Correct. There's no doubt. There was a lot of things happening all at the same time. Obi-Wan, do you have any comments?
It just shows like how all this was transpiring way before the Avery case and possibly through and on after Avery's conviction, yet still, there was never no accountability. He really never even got in trouble. I mean, he resigned, but that's not really being held accountable for anything,
Correct.
And this is their means of escape or evading prosecution.
Correct. And if I could just, thank you, Obi-Wan, if I could just echo with what Kelly's experience was, and Christy will tell you, Ken Kratz wrote in his book a chapter called The Prize. And he starts off, and I quote, "Why did I do it? 30 times. And Lord knows it probably was more than 30 times, probably with 30 different women. And don't forget, only some of his victims have come forward. I would say that some either are too ashamed or don't want to be involved. But the chapter 12, The Prize, is just mind-blowing. And if we can go to slide 205, this really is just a big summary, really, of his demeanor. And don't forget, you don't just suddenly become this type of person. It's in your DNA. Ken Kratz would have been like this for a long period of time. Christy.
I'm the attorney. I have the $350,000 house. I have the six-figure income or the six-figure career. Because he had nothing else to sell himself with. All he had had was, I have a $350,000 house and I make six figures a year. So do a lot of other people that are better human beings than you, because just ew. Leah Kratz is the female on the planet that wants that man.
Correct. And just to continue the quote, thank you, Christy. "You may be the tall, young, hot nymph, but I am the prize." And that reminds me very much of the way Ken Kratz was behaving with Kelly, right? In a way, he was doing the same thing, right? And it's remarkable that apparently he's meant to have been cured of his addiction to sex, addiction to drugs, his narcissism. But I don't think so. Christy, do you have any comments?
Maybe the Constellation Prize.
The Constellation.
They're not first prize, that's for damn sure.
Correct. And if we have a look at slide 205, this is scary because Kelly was telling us his interaction with Ken Kratz. And lo and behold, what does he write to one of his domestic victims? "Are you the kind of girl that likes secret contact with an older married elected DA? The riskier, the better." Now, guys, let's don't forget, these are domestic abuse victims, right? They've been abused by their spouses, by their partners. Lo and behold, Ken Kratz knows their names, their addresses, their phone numbers, is likely representing them in court. So why on earth is he involved in this behavior? It's because he is behaving like a sexual predator. He's got all the details. He's got the pick of the bunch. He knows what they've been involved in. He knows that these women are in a vulnerable position. You can't get any worse than that. J. Jax, do you have any comments?
Just a quick comment. He put himself, and however he did it, not knowing the exact history, he put himself in the perfect position of being the wolf among the sheep. And I don't care how anybody argues it. You said it a minute ago. This guy didn't just wake up in 2008 or whenever that was and say, I'm a predator now and I'm going to go out. He's been this way.
Correct.
The wiring got screwed up somewhere, and he's been this way for decades.
There's no doubt about it. The guy is a dangerous sexual predator, but this is worse because he is in a position of power. He's in a position of trust, right? So he's like the wolf. This is a smorgasbord for him. You've got all these potential females that he can predate on. Big Jeff, do you have a comment?
I mean, please correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of some of his antics is that he told some of these domestic abuse victims that he would not, unless they were to comply, that he would not prosecute their abuser. Kind of put them under the gun, held that over their head. That's worse. That's even worse, right?
Yes, I believe that's the case. Now, a normal member of society, if they tried that stunt, that's prison time. And considering that he was in a position of power, he should have received twice the sentence. He got away really scot-free. Yes, there were consequences to him, but he really should have been behind bars, in my opinion. Obi-Wan, do you have a quick comment?
Yeah, like when just his behavior, like with fully questioning him, he was questioning fully about how he had obtained this information. He was asking he was asking to find out what victim actually had released information, and he knew exactly who it was because he was calling her name out, but he just wanted admittance from Foley as to who the identity of this woman was. And it just shows like how he stated, he said that what is it, the OLR or basically found him I guess you could say not guilty or whatever. But his demeanor and how he was find out the identity of the person that released. It just seems like he would have done some type of retaliation or have done something
no
to
question.
Get back,
No question. In actual fact, thank you, Obi-Wan.
In a way, it's like intimidation of a witness,
No doubt. In fact, he actually names one of the domestic abuse victims in his book. Christy, do you have a quick comment?
I wanted to go back to what J. Jack said a few minutes earlier. And I've said this before in other podcasts. I've said it in other discussions. There is no way in hell you will ever convince me that that man's drug problem started after these trials, because there's no way any sane, reputable prosecutor not on drugs would have sat at that table and gave that disgusting press conference he gave that day. There's no way.
No. He knew what he was doing. He had a plan, he had a strategy, he had no evidence, yet he still went ahead. He poisoned the jury pool, right? And you can't undo what he did.
In my opinion, only somebody with a drug problem would do that.
I agree, only because Ken Kratz had no filter, right? He didn't filter anything he said. He enjoyed the limelight. He knew the cameras were on him, and you can see the awkwardness that Pagel had sitting right next to him. right? Pagel just kept his mouth shut, and Ken Kratz kept on going and going and going, and it looked really bad. J. Jax, do you have a comment?
Yeah, to answer, to comment on what Obi-Wan has said, if I'm remembering correct, Kratz pled no contest to 6 charges from the OLR. And he was ultimately, of course, they stripped him of his license for, I think, 4 months. And he ended up paying some $23,000 or $24,000 in fines.
Yes. Yes.
So, I mean, he didn't get any jail time. He didn't really get any real punishment that he couldn't recover from, like in being thrown in jail for, years for what he had done.
Correct.
But it's still on his record. But, this goes back to the 2-system thing of him being tried in the OLR handling this part of it instead of him going into a regular courtroom and facing a jury. So that's all I got.
Correct. Thank you, J. Jax. Bibi, do you have a comment?
Well, you would have thought that he would have lost like his law license forever, maybe even.
Yes. But you're right, Bibi. But we know what happened afterwards, the domino effect of what happened afterwards. Millbilly, do you have a comment?
Well, he went from being a prosecutor to becoming a defense attorney.
Yes. He suffered professionally as a consequence of that sexting scandal. And if I could just quote from his book, and Christy and I, in the Linda Kay podcast, we also gave these quotes because it really reflects on his behavior. He says, and I quote, this is chapter 12, The Prize. I am proud to say that despite losing friends and my career as a prosecutor, despite being ruined financially and professionally, I have held fast to my recovery and the things I learned in treatment. Right? And yet, what does he do? What does he do to Kelly? He's displaying that predatory behavior again on another female, despite him admitting that apparently he's cured. Christy, do you have any comments?
Are we going to read the next paragraph too? Or are you just going to read that one? The next little quote? Call it a paragraph.
Christy, have you got it in front of you?
I do. I just grabbed it.
Okay, Christy, go for it. Because
this one makes me want to reach through the book and punch him. I wonder whether things might have been different for Stephen Avery if he'd been forced to confront his own narcissism and entitlement. If he'd found a way to manage his anger that didn't involve lashing out at others. I wonder too how things might have been different for Teresa Hallback. Get over yourself. Just get over yourself. You're such an asshole. I can't even. I hope you're listening. We know you listen. You're an asshole. Charles Darwin.
Yes. Thank you, Christy. And it's important for our listeners to really understand the mind of Ken Kratz. And that's why I read the book with Christy and we analyzed it. What he did was your classic displacement. So he knew what he did with the sexting scandal was wrong. He blamed it on his drugs, his sex addiction, his narcissism. Now, instead of saying, I'm sorry, he now dragged in Stephen Avery, the person he put behind bars for life. And now he's accusing Stephen Avery of being a narcissist. And it's a pity that Stephen Avery didn't get treatment like he did, so that nothing would have happened to Teresa Hallback. And to me, that just displays the character of the man. He's dangerous. He's hardwired. He's not fixed. Clearly, given the opportunity, he would do it again and again, which is remarkable because that's why he's so hell-bent to make sure that Brendan doesn't get released. In fact, he even mocked the judge, Judge Duffin, by saying, even implying, and if you don't believe me, have a look at the book, he's worried, now this is Ken Kratz, he's worried that if Brendan Dassey gets released, Brendan Dassey is going to do a big civil lawsuit But not only that, Ken Kratz is worried that Brendan Dassey will kill and kill again, right? And then they're going to make another MAM series talking about the wrongful release of Brendan Dassey. So that's how Ken Kratz works. Ken Kratz cannot let it go. Remember, the important thing here, what is the state doing? They're protecting the verdicts. They can't get those two boys to be released ever. That's the way they work, guys. They don't want to assist or help Kathleen Zellner in any manner. And we can see that by the way the state keeps on stonewalling Kathleen Zellner. Guys, panel, any comments? Maz, do you have any comments? All quiet.
No, I'm
Maz.
trying to get my phone back on again.
Yes,
I'm
no
fine.
worries.
Doing a fantastic job.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so so here we have hard evidence of Ken Kratz with his sexting scandal. But you know what? What's even more disgusting, if we have a look at slide 206, Ken Kratz has been at this for more than a year prior to the sexting scandal, right? And I quote, nearly a year before the story breaks, Ken Kratz exchanges emails with the Wisconsin Department of Justice. The incredible shocking thing for me was that Ken Kratz is arguing with his fellow colleagues saying, hey, what's your problem? Have I done anything wrong? Can you tell me what I've done where I've transgressed? He clearly has got no concept of his sexting scandal, right? And he's pleading with his fellow colleagues, you know, I've been in this game for a very long period of time. I've helped a lot of victims of crime. You know, what's your problem? And I quote, this is from Ken Kratz, you should be well aware of my 25-year reputation in the prosecution community. It is disturbing that you have not noted that reality or my dedication to the rights of crime victims. Panel, where do we go from here? This is unbelievable. Christy, do you have a comment?
I don't give a damn how many crime victims you helped. When you harassed one of them, it negates everyone that you helped. Every one of them.
Correct. It's like if I could just make the analogy, it's like, oh, I killed this person, I murdered them, but for the last 30 years, I was a good citizen. I never killed anybody. Please take it lightly on me. Yes, it was a terrible death, a terrible murder. I only shot the victim 12 times, but please be kind to me because I was a good person prior. That's what Ken Kratz was pleading with his fellow attorneys and other members of the Department of Justice. Hey, go easy on me because of my reputation.
Great analogy. Perfect.
What the hell? J. Jax, do you have a comment?
I'd love to. Yeah, I don't think you've had time to read them yet, but back several months ago, fellow truther void some information, and within that information were emails from, these go back to 2000, some of them are back to 2004,
right,
2002. But anyway, within these emails were various communication, and I certainly didn't put them all in there because you can clearly see Ken Kratz talking and corresponding with various people in the, in his job, and he's normal.
Yes.
He sounds like a normal person. Then
right.
You see this other side when he's corresponding with like Kevin Potter at the DOJ when all this stuff happens, and this other side of him comes out that's completely different than all these other communications. It's insane. It's like a Jekyll and Hyde.
Oh, look, there's no question. But you see, thank you, Jax. The thing is, Ken Kratz doesn't back down. He doesn't back down. He doesn't apologize. He's got crocodile tears. He wants justification. And I quote from another email. He says, I quote, I further assume that you would be too embarrassed by my continued involvement in assisting DOJ in the Steve Avery and Brendan Dassey post-conviction matters. I want to hear you ask me to step aside from those duties as well. Oh my God. So now he can't understand why his presence at these committees or post-conviction matters is not a good idea, right? He can't see the reason why. Christy Lynn, do you have any comment?
Yes, I just want to say that it has been at least a year since I have read these emails in their totality. I highly suggest people go find these emails and read them, because his assholeness comes through in every single word. He thinks he is above the OLR. He thinks he is above everybody, and how dare they do this to him?
Correct. He challenged them. He challenged them to basically, hey, look, go easy on me. My reputation precedes me. I'm a good guy. I've helped domestic abuse victims in the past. What's your issue? In fact, Ken Kratz didn't actually think he did anything wrong. That was the problem. Now, he went to therapy, he went to treatment. He believes that he's cured. But this is, in my opinion, it's hardwired in him, right? Now, you could tell, you could talk to Kelly. Kelly would tell you that he was trying to groom her. He was trying to get closer to her. This didn't sound normal for someone who's a married man to start doing things like this. Christy, do you have a...
Absolutely. The way he just kept calling her Kelly had to run to work, so she's not here. She told me I have to speak for her.
Yes.
The way he kept calling her his little Nancy Drew. You can be my little Nancy Drew. Get out of here, you sick. Oh, gross. Oh God, her and I laughed for hours and hours at night over those messages going back and forth.
Yes.
A married man who is supposedly reformed, and as stated in the previous quote that we read from him from the book, he got help. No, he didn't. He's still doing it. Maybe he's not as demanding, and maybe he's got a little bit more tact, but he's still doing the same damn thing.
Correct.
He has less access now, so it's whatever he does, it's got to be far more subtle.
Correct. And don't quote me on this. But apparently on one of his videos, he had like links in his one of his videos, and it was how to build a secret dungeon, which was rather remarkable when you consider that that's exactly what he accused Steve Avery of doing, of building this torture chamber for women. And yet on his website, he had a link on how to build a secret compartment in your house. Obi-Wan, do you have any comments?
Yeah, he's pretty much still the same person, because I mean, back then when this all was like an issue and it was surfacing, Ma'am hadn't yet been released, and no one thought that it would turn out the way that it is now. I mean, there's so many different communities popping up left and right. There's more people getting active, and I mean, he has like an unlimited supply of people he could target now, and there's no way he's stopping.
Correct. He wants his fan base. He wants his female fan base. And he really can't comprehend and understand why society in general turned against him. He's got no idea. And Christy and I, we read the book. We also went to Amazon and had a look at the comments. 75% of people, this is verified customers that bought the book, gave him a 1-star review. 75%, right? And a lot of people commented that if they could have given 0, they would have given 0. But the minimum you can give is 1 star. So if 3/4 of the people that bought your book rated your book as 1 star, and boy, oh boy, did people rip into Ken Kratz. Christy and I were very tame when we reviewed his book, but others, they let go. They really ripped into him. I summarize chapter 12. I've got to read it out. Sorry, Christy. I've got to read it out. I summarized chapter 12, which is the prize. I said, chapter of narcissistic, drug-taking, addicted to sex, wanking. And that, in a way, encapsulated his chapter on the prize. He was basically saying, hey, look, guys, I did this. I'm sorry. I went to all these therapy sessions. I'm cured. No, you're not, Ken. No, you're not. Christy.
We may have been tame on Linda's, but some of those reviews out there are actually legitimately mine, and I was not nice. I was not nice at all.
Yes. Yeah. No, they were very hard hitting, and so they should be. This guy, in my opinion, he was the most dangerous person in that courtroom. There's no question about it. He was very, very dangerous. We know, guys, you've heard it through the podcast, you've read it through the books. He made this very, very personal. This was a personal vendetta against Stephen. This was a personal vendetta against the Avery family. And you can see that even in the notes of O'Kelly, right? The Avery family were accused of all things. Now, look, let's get it straight. They're not the most holiest family in Wisconsin or America, but oh my Lord, if you shine the spotlight on any family, there's going to be skeletons in every family. So why Ken Kratz decided to pick on Stephen Avery and the Avery and Dasty family, I still can't understand it. That they were very, very disliked, fortunately, and guys, they all paid a price and are still paying a price. Okay, so guys, if we can advance to slide 207, we're nearly finished with the sweaty boy. Well, believe it or not, right? And I'll quote, according to news reports, the allegations of the women who came forward range from sending inappropriate text messages to Kratz inviting a woman on a date to an autopsy. To an autopsy. And Bibi, do you want to be invited to a date and attend an autopsy?
I think that's just so he doesn't have to buy him dinner.
That's true. But I mean, how romantic. Take a lady to an autopsy. Bibi?
I'm too old for heels, so he wouldn't want me. I'm aged out.
All right. So, and I quote, Ken Kratz seeks treatment for prescription drug dependence and sexual addiction. In October 2010, now remember, this is when the post-conviction trials were happening as well, he resigns from office, ending his involvement in the Stevens and Brendan's cases. Yet, look at him. He is up to his eyeballs in news groups, chat, YouTube. He's everywhere. He's still got an ear to the ground. Guys, do we have any comments?
He's remained involved, and he did it on purpose. He's continued. I mean, just look as recent as 2000, before he wrote his book, or when he was writing his book, he tried to get access to his old case files, which had all of his old whatever, plus that old laptop that contained everything, which of course as far as we can tell, he didn't get that. He wasn't allowed access, but he basically said, if I'm remembering right, he could just come and copy it. He wanted full access.
Yes. Thank you, Jax. Big Jeff, do you have a comment?
He doesn't really grasp the level of his own narcissism to this day. The Avery and Dassey verdicts are his crown jewel of his career. The most important thing that he wants everybody to remember him for. And he's going to be absolutely humiliated when this conviction, Kathleen Zellner finally gets her way and overturns this conviction, gets his butt on the seat at a second trial that Stephen's going to get. And she is going to make him look like a buffoon.
Correct.
And I can't wait.
Correct. Like I said, I was staggered, and Jay Jax will back me up. I couldn't believe that during those 2010 post-conviction trials, it was Fallon. Fallon was objecting at a lot of the questions being asked to, now wait for it, Kaczynski, O'Kelly, all the team, all the members that were part of the defense. Fallon came to their rescue by objecting as often as possible. It was unbelievable, Jay Jax.
Yeah, which, I think I said it last week. I couldn't believe that the state was defending these defense guys instead of them having their own damn lawyers.
Yes.
What is this?
Yes. It is truly remarkable. Anything that was sort of like could be blocked, Fallon immediately said, "Judge, I object." And especially when Ken Kratz was being questioned, the amount of times that Fallon tried to object to prevent certain lines of questioning by Dvorak and Drizin was phenomenal. And you're thinking, wait a minute. Jay Jax will admit, of course, Kaczynski and O'Kelly really were part of the state, right? Jay Jax.
Absolutely. And there's another aspect of these hearings, too, that came out. And I don't know if you've read it or remember reading it, but Fallon, and I think even Kratz at this point, they tried to get work product from the Dvorak and Drizin and Nyrider. They tried to get stuff turned over, and Fox wouldn't allow it. I can't remember what it was. I'd have to go back and look.
Yes,
but that's how dirty they played. They tried to get work product from them, and they're like, you can't have that.
Yep, correct. It's the behavior was phenomenal, but Fallon knows the laws. Some of them are specific Wisconsin laws, and he knows them back and forward. And it's just lawyer versus attorney versus attorney. They use every rule in the book to block certain lines of inquiry. And Fallon is a master. Ken Kratz did exactly the same thing. I remember when Barb Tadich was on the stand being questioned during those post-conviction trials, Ken Kratz basically tried to shut that whole line of questioning down. He objected all the time. And what was amazing was that the judge even told Dvorak to shut up a couple of times, right? Because Dvorak was going really deep into the questioning, trying to work out what actually took place. And even the judge told him, you could tell the judge was being frustrated because Dvorak was going deeper and deeper, and told him to shut up on a couple of occasions, which is truly, truly remarkable. Okay, guys, are there any further comments? Can we leave Sweaty Boy behind?
I have a question. We have a Kenneth here that's asking, is it true the new phone message to KZ about the bones? Not sure it's true.
You mean when they accidentally phoned up Kathleen Zellner?
Oh, it happened. It's real.
Yeah, it was real.
She included
Kathleen,
it in her. She included it in her filing.
correct. I forgot the name of the gentleman, but he
Williams.
rang.
Williams.
Mark
Yeah,
Williams.
Mark
yeah.
Williams.
He actually rang Kathleen Zellner, not realizing that apparently he was talking to. He just left a phone message. But surely, if you ring up the law firm of Kathleen Zellner, she would have a message to say, this is Kathleen Zellner, attorneys, etc., etc. So I believe it was a deliberate ploy on their part,
I do too.
basically to say, oh, look, guys, we better let them know about the fact that, the bones are gone and we need to have a look what's in the plastic bags. And this is all part of a strategy. Millbilly, do you have a comment?
Nope.
Okay. Yeah, so that phone call took place. The gentleman who phoned up, accidentally phoned up Kathleen Zellner and told them of their plans, their strategic plans, what they're going to do with the bones. So, yeah, that's been recorded, and it's actually in one of the filings, which is remarkable. Big Jeff, do you have a comment?
Yeah, excuse me, correct me if I'm wrong, but Williams is the new attorney that the state has actually brought on, because his expertise is these evidence getting accidentally lost aspects.
Yeah, that's about right, Big Jeff. Look, I was going to say, Big Jeff, thank you for that. Let's don't muck around here, guys. We know that the bones are gone. The bones were an important piece of forensic biological evidence because Kathleen Zellner, through her expert, now think about this, guys. He's this guy invented the anti-rapid DNA system, and they used it to identify burn victims. I think it was the California fires, because the system that he developed is very, very powerful. It works on DNA that's been degraded, right? That's precisely what you want to analyze cremains. So he was going to test it. Now, he built a machine. He's an engineer, a molecular biologist. He built a machine. You don't even need to do anything yourself. You load the sample in the machine and it does all the analysis for you. So you can get Cohane right out of the equation. All the extractions are all done under sterile conditions, right? So you would have thought the state would have said, oh, wow, great. We can actually test the cremains. Oh, no. I think it was Judge Suckowitz, I think, even wrote, oh, you technically can't use that machine because it's illegal to use in this type of analysis, even though the FBI now utilize the rapid DNA system. So you can see that the state was using every excuse not to test the biological evidence, right? So, Big Jeff, what you're saying, people that have got nothing to hide, why are they continuously hiding things? Is that right, Big Jeff?
That's exactly right. And this is another example.
Yeah. So, so the bones are gone. You could bet you that the RAV4 and the other forensic evidence, the swabs, there's going to be a mysterious flood or fire or a theft. They're going to be gone. They'll be gone. Sammy, do you have a comment?
Yeah, Julie on here saying, is Fallon still on sabbatical? Maybe that's why the state requested an extension, because they need him back to help them fudge up their response.
Yeah, look, Fallon is a very scary legal expert. That he knows the law backwards and forwards. He can quote anything from anywhere in any case. And they're going to use all these type of legal arguments to block Kathleen Zellner as much as possible. But the day of reckoning is coming. They know it. The state knows it. So when that happens, it's going to be very, very bad, potentially very, very bad for the state. But the state are trying to legally block Kathleen Zellner and her experts as much as possible. We can see it from a mile away. Thank you very much, Sammy. All right, guys. If we can, we're moving along quite nicely. If we can go to slide 208. And again, this is a very, very, very sad situation here. Now, Jay Jacks will back me up on this, right? If you read the 2010 post-convictions, it's as bad as it's going to get. It's overt as it's going to get. The defense, Kaczynski, O'Kelly, they were in the pocket of Ken Kratz and the state. No question. They were working for the state. They come up with a plan. That plan badly backfired. Now, during the interrogations, none of them said, I don't remember, I can't think of this. Oh no, they all openly admitted what they did. And the reason why they couldn't get out of it was they had all the emails. They had all the information that was going back and forth. And guess what? Ken Kratz was CC'd in all of them. So Ken Kratz knew what was going on. Well, despite all the overt nefarious activity, I'll quote, on December the 13th, 2010, now remember, Judge Fox was the original presiding judge. He denies Brendan's motion for a new trial. Guys, where do we go from here? Right? Despite how bad the 2010 post-conviction hearings were, the judge says, no, you're not going for a new trial. Guys, do we have any comments?
I think it was an abomination. I think it was an abomination of, there's just no way that what came out during those hearings couldn't have been, unless Fox knew, a lot of this information was new. It didn't come out in 2006 and 2007. We didn't find out about it until 2010. So, it's almost like, Fox has protected himself. He's embarrassed. Yes. I mean, in the reality, he should have taken Kaczynski out. And if the legal system worked the way we think it should work, he should have taken Kaczynski out back and beat his ass. I'm pardon my French here, but because he really, what he pulled with Kratz, they were definitely colluding. It's so obvious.
Yes.
And why he didn't correct that, I just don't get.
Correct. And to make matters worse, right? Remember when Brendan initially applied for Kaczynski to be fired? And then Judge Fox was saying, well, I don't see any malice activity here. You seem to be getting along fine with your attorney. So I now say, no, you can't get rid of Kaczynski, right? And he said this in court. And Brendan's going, look, I want a new lawyer. I'm not happy with. And Judge Fox says, why do you want to change your lawyer? And remember what Brendan said? Brendan said, because he thinks I'm guilty. Right? And I'm then to myself, at least Brendan had the lucidity to know what was going on, right? Because obviously he was talking to his mom, he was talking to his grandparents. They said, Brendan, your own lawyer thinks you're guilty. And yet the judge, Judge Fox, saw nothing wrong with that until it was so bad when Kaczynski didn't show up for that interview where Fassbender and we get interviewed Brendan without his presence. The judge had no choice but to fire him, right? But of course, a lot of the damage had been done. How are you going to rectify that? The damage had been done. So after the Judge Fox, denies Brendan for a new trial, despite all the admissions, it says here, and I'll quote, the Center on Wrongful Convictions of Youth will take Brendan's case to the Wisconsin State Court of Appeals. And so the circus and the merry-go-round continues. Remember, this is on a child in which there is no forensic evidence against him, right? And this merry-go-round is still going on with Brendan. Guys, do we have any comments? Big Jeff.
I mean, just we've been over it and over it, but what happened to him was terrible. But I mean, to me, this, you ask yourself whether you would prefer an appointed judiciary or an elected judiciary, and there's just no good answer. When clowns get in there, it's just
correct.
It's just disastrous. They're equal. They're political pawns.
Correct.
No matter what happens, and it's disheartening. Where can you go for fairness? And there just doesn't seem to be anywhere to turn just for fundamental fairness when something like this happens.
Correct. Thank you, Big Jeff. Millbilly, do you have a comment?
They're just passing the torch.
Yes, they are. And the other thing that I see it, now I'm from Australia, so I'm seeing it as an outsider. But it's so obvious. What they're doing is, apart from protecting the verdicts, this is too much of a hot political potato, right? All the judges know that if they release Brendan or Stephen, it's their career. They're gone. They'll be put in such a bad light that they might as well leave Wisconsin or America, right? So nobody wants to take that responsibility. They're handballing it to the next person down the line, right? And so even when Judge Duffin says, "Hey, release this boy. This is a disgusting coerced confession," right? So the Judge Duffin already said this is rubbish. I think you wrote correct me if I'm wrong, but a 90 or 91 page report and analyzed everything. And so one person got it. One person understood the plight of Brendan and the fact that he was coerced. All the information was coming from the investigators. Big Jeff, do you have a comment?
In addition to Judge Duffin, I also think that Judge Wood did an admirable job in preparing the minority opinion, because he actually put together tables and counted up the number of times that that suggestions were made that he hopped upon and said in her tables where this particular suggestion came from, or how it was there's only a small leap from here to here. So Judge Duffin, yes. Also, Judge Wood also deserves applause here.
Thank you. Thank you, Big Jeff. Sammy, do you have a comment?
Well, I have a comment in here from Bean Green. Brendan was on the schedule to be discussed in the Supreme Court, but they canceled it without explanation, according to Wikipedia.
Oh, Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Well, yes. I mean, by all rights, Brendan should be free, right? But was it Schimmel?
Exactly.
Schimmel, who blocked it, and he went on national television and said, "You must think of the grieving Horbach family." So, in other words, what Schimmel is saying, Brendan Dassey, you're guilty. We're not going to release you. So, and you can see what Ken Kratz wrote in his book. There's a fear that if Brendan gets released, he's going to kill again. Even though the state have got no evidence he did anything the first time round. That's the party line that they toe. Big Jeff, do you have any comments?
Excuse me, the Supreme Court of the United States, it is a fact, and there always is a possibility for shenanigans, don't get me wrong, but the Supreme Court of the United States hears only a tiny fraction of the actual cases so the Circuit Court of Appeals and the federal appeal system is the de facto Supreme Court of the United States. Because of the small fraction of actual cases the Supreme Court hears, the rules that sort of get in place is because of the Federal Circuit Appeals Court, and that's just a sad fact.
Correct, but Big Jeff, we all know this is not just U.S. This is worldwide. This is so bad that, there are many. You have a look how many people are on the foul play team that are from Australia. I've got a person who lives down my street. He's on, part of the foul play team. It's everywhere because it's so scary. It's so frightening that we can be in that situation. A loved one can be in that situation. To me, it's a lot of ego, a lot of pride, but there's got to be something big that the state does not want to come out. And we know that Stephen Avery got very close with the civil case. There would have been a corruption probe. Lord knows what they would have uncovered. I know I'm speculating, but when you have a corruption probe, boy, everything's on the table. Everything gets investigated. And I know in Australia, we have things called royal commissions. It doesn't matter whether you're the prime minister from the top to the bottom, you're going to get showed if there's evidence to suggest you've done something wrong. It doesn't matter who you are or what your reputation is. You'll either be heavily fined or go to prison. That's what happens in Australia. But you can see here, they're trying to block an investigation. They must be protecting something huge. Just speculation, but that's the way it looks to me. Big Jeff.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It was a bad day to be boss hog and corrupt the walk, for those who are old enough to get that analogy.
Yes.
When the political winds start to blow, and both sides of the Wisconsin legislature were lining up behind the Avery bill, and something's got to be done. And oh my God, look at this! We have to get to the bottom of the whatever spawned this. Of course, Pagel gave the whitewash. But Vogel and Kasurik were about to be deposed, and it was going to get ugly. So, I mean,
correct.
How is your analysis not spot on? I defy anyone to challenge the logic that you just put forward based on that.
Correct. Yeah, I mean,
I think we have a serious question here. Someone is asking, has anyone tweeted Trump about this?
That's funny. I was just about to address that comment. Trump can't do anything. This is a state case. Trump is federal.
Correct.
There's nothing the president of the United States can do. When Make Murderer first came out, there was a huge petition sent to Barack Obama, and
that's correct.
There's nothing they can do. There's state level case.
Correct. That's good. They tried to let Obama know, but I think the White House wrote a reply saying we can't do anything about it. It's a local thing. But you see, Big Jeff.
He could put pressure on the Department of Justice to investigate the corruption of the local law enforcement, because that's who does that investigation. That might not help Stephen, but to say, I completely, he cannot issue a pardon for Stephen, and there's very little he can do to help Stephen, but he could attempt to get to the bottom of the corruption.
That's true, because remember when Dr. LeBeau from the FBI got subpoenaed and they were questioning him, and they said, basically, why is the FBI involved? Well, we want to determine whether there's corrupt officials, right? Now, the problem is, right, who's in charge of the FBI? Aren't they related to Pagel? Big Jeff?
Yeah, the Attorney General. It was Janet Reno was in charge of the FBI back then.
Yes, but what about Pagel's son? What's he involved in?
Well, he's the current Attorney General.
Yeah, well, there you go. So what happens is, if you put the right people in the right places, they act as a doorstop, right? So obviously Pagel's son is going to protect his mother's integrity, right? So it's going to look really bad if all the fingers point back to Pagel, because remember, she's the one that wrote that report regarding Penny. So Pagel said, there's nothing nefarious here, nothing to see. Sammy, do you have a question?
Yeah, Tracy's mentioning on here Obama did something after Khalif Browder case.
Yes, that's true. But remember, he was in a state penitentiary, Rikers Island, I think it was, and I remember they even said, because I saw the program, they said, "Oh, we're going to dismantle that prison. We're going to do reforms, etc., etc." But you know that, right? Things take between 5 and 10 years before they even move, right? So at the end of the day, with Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey, there's the fear, and that's what it is, fear that they may release people who they believe are guilty, right? So the consequence is the way they work is, okay, we've put 10 people in prison. We know 3 of them are innocent, but doesn't matter. The other 7 are guilty, so therefore that's okay. We've got guilty people in prison. But the price to pay is that there are innocent people in prison. What did Kathleen Zellner say? You get wrongfully accused, you're looking at a minimum of 15 years before there's a turnaround. So you have to sit in prison for 15 years on average before your case is heard, before you're released. What happened to Khalif is horrendous. Horrendous. And he was accused of, wait for it, of stealing a backpack. A backpack with no forensic evidence. And in the end, they dropped the case after that poor boy spent years in solitary confinement in a maximum security prison. Sam.
It was horrible. It was horrible.
Yeah, it's as almost as bad as you can get, but it happened. All right, guys. Now, I am conscious of the time, and I do want to finish the podcast. I want this to be our final one for Man 1, or to wrap this up. So, guys, if we go to slide 209, we really don't have to spend too much time on that. Basically, the same thing happened to Stephen. Many of his appeals were overturned or not even looked at. So now, poor Stephen, back then, he was actually left with no appointed counsel, and he didn't have a lawyer. So what does Stephen decide to do? He decides he's going to investigate his own case. And we can see here, I think it's Sandy. Look at all those boxes of documents that Stephen allegedly went through, and he wrote a 38-page motion for post-conviction relief. My understanding is I don't even think they even looked at it. They just rejected it outright. Panel, any comments on that? You can see that both Stephen and Brendan have been faced with walls, blocked at every occasion. Panel, any comments? Jax.
Just look at that very first thing you put in that slide there in August 2011 time frame. What happened in September? Fallon, Gollin, and the gang get ready to do Bonegate and let all the bones go.
Oh, correct. You can't tell me that's random.
It's not. No way.
No. These guys are following events very, very carefully, and they're considering that if Stephen's lawyers can get access to the bones, Lord knows what type of information they can find. So yeah, you've now got Bonegate. So the cremains are given back to the Hallbuck family. Kathleen Zellner attests that she never received that page from the document saying that, oh, by the way, we gave the bones back to the Hallbuck family, and it was a member of the research community, I can't remember the person's name, who alerted Kathleen Zellner, oh, by the way, in case so, that's what has happened. They've given the bones away. Kathleen Zellner says, nobody told me about it. I didn't receive that page. So you can see that there are
They never
Plenty
sent.
of shenanigans.
Yeah, they never sent those.
Carol Ann something, right?
Carol Ann
Correct, yeah.
Fitzgerald.
Yeah,
Yes.
Correct.
yeah.
Maz.
They
Maz,
never sent those pages to Hagopian and alerted her that they were going to do that.
Correct. Maz, do you have a comment?
No, I was just going to say it was Carol Ann Fitzgerald Lee who actually found the missing bit of paperwork and then forwarded it on.
Wow. Yep. And I'll tell you what, how important was that? Because then Kathleen Zellner's experts did all this uncovering of information regarding those bones. Yeah, it was enormous. Big Jeff, do you have a comment?
Yeah, isn't it the case that Carol Ann came on that because she FOIA'd some information and they sent it finally for the first time ever, this last page, to somebody who they hadn't sent it to before? Wasn't it via FOIA?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Just speaks to the tremendous importance.
No,
wrong. Okay, no, I'm sorry.
No, we had it in queso all along. Just nobody thought anything of it. It was in queso all along. Kathleen never got that page of it. We had it ever since that first crowdsourcing with Skip Top. Correct, Jax?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. But I'll still highlight the importance of the FOIA and everybody.
No question.
And when you FOIA something, please disseminate it as widely as possible. Please let everybody get their own eyes on it as soon as possible. There is a Discord FOIA server available for people to get any access to any of this information.
Yes,
can, because I think everybody's been excellent about that.
Even if you FOIA things and you've been denied, that'd be helpful too.
Yes, it will be, Millbilly. Yes, it will be. And I think on Foul Play, we've got an actual folder with all that information in there. And yeah, it's good to know what has been successful and what hasn't been successful. And there's still a lot of stuff that has still been suppressed and kept and not released. Big Jeff,
it's a whole server. It's a whole server. It's not just, we do have a FOIA folder there, but there's a whole server, independent server, where multiple people from the multiple different groups are participating to make sure that there's maximum awareness of what has. I mean, how else would we know that there's if we didn't have that? But for people like Jax who inform us that there's calls between Stephen and Jody prior to October 31st that they're denying releasing. Why?
Correct.
Right? I mean, isn't that
there's
an essential piece of information? There's more than that. Yeah, go ahead, Melanie.
26th to the 4th, there's multiple calls missing.
Correct.
At least 4 that I know of.
There's 8.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. And Christy will back me up on this. It's because Ken Kratz was trying to give the impression that Stephen Avery was planning this in advance, as in planning to lure Teresa Hallbach onto the Avery salvage yard. So he's trying to give the impression that Stephen Avery was trying to lure. That's why he kept on talking about the Tau incidents. Right, Christy? That's why he kept on mentioning about Stephen Avery confronting or meeting Teresa Hallbach in a white towel, because he's a sexual pervert and he wanted to lure Teresa back for the express purposes of sexually assaulting her and then killing her. Christy.
Yeah, that's exactly what he tried to portray. He was planning it. He was plotting it Yeah.
I mean, for me personally, what disturbed me a real lot was that Ken Kratz was saying, well, yes, we know that he was talking to Jody on the phone calls, and I bet you he was multitasking. So in other words, he was trying to give the impression that while he was cool, calm, and collective, he had Teresa Hallbach chained up, raping her, killing her, at the same time that he was talking calmly to Jody. Now, that's the way Ken Kratz works. That's his mind. Jay Jax, do you have a comment?
Most ridiculous thing. It's laughable. It is so laughable.
Yeah, yeah. He says it in his book. He makes it explicit in his book. And he even mentioned, now wait for it, on the call, I heard the chirping of a police radio. So he's now worried if the police are talking about, Teresa's missing. So in other words, he forgot that Stephen Avery works for a salvage yard. And they're listening to the police channel all the time because there are car accidents. So that's why they go out with their trucks to go collect the vehicles involved in the collision. But Ken Kratz tried to turn it around, thinking that, Stephen must be eavesdropping on the police, hearing what they're talking about. That's the way Ken Kratz worked. And of course, it's ridiculous and disgusting. All right, guys. Well, if we turn to slide 210, we really don't have to spend too much time on this. Essentially, it's about, and I'll quote, on January the 30th, 2013, the Wisconsin Court of Appeals upholds Judge Fox's decision denying Brendan a new trial. Brendan's lawyers petitioned the Wisconsin Supreme Court to review his case. So poor Brendan has been getting all these denials. And the good thing is, in MAM 2, which is something that I'll be definitely looking into researching, a lot of this material is re-examined, and they go through all the chronology of all the petitions and court appearances. So it'll be definitely worth going over that again. But we know what happened with Judge Duffin, right? We know the outcome. And the frustrating thing is, this poor boy is still sitting in prison. He's like a political prisoner in a way. So, the judge found that really his statements were inadmissible. Ken Kratz in his book goes, even if they were inadmissible, we've got further testimonies. But the further testimonies are just as problematic, if not more problematic. What Fassbender and Wiegert were doing, guys, was that they were steering Brendan to write a nice, neat little confession so that Ken Kratz can say, look what I got. So therefore, he doesn't have to go down the route of all the forensics. So he had it in mind that he was going to call up Brendan and say, okay, Brendan, read out your statement. Thank you very much. He's your star witness. But of course, Brendan completely contradicted himself and there was no corroborating evidence. The judge, Judge Duffin, he was not silly. He saw all the loopholes. In fact, there were academics that analysed all of the interrogation sessions, and you can see clear signs of coercion. And in a lot of cases, Brendan merely guessed at an answer, right? And the investigators just simply steered Brendan until Brendan told them what they wanted to hear. Okay, so guys, we can now move. We're nearly finished, guys. I can't believe it, but we can now move to slide 211. And the sad thing is, remember, this is MAM 1, which was aired years ago. And it says here, this was at that stage, now 26 years old, Brendan remains at Green Bay Correctional. I think he's been moved now to something much more low security. And I quote, he will be eligible for early release in 2048. That's another 28 years from now, right? At the age of 58, right? And think about it, guys. There's no forensic evidence against him. It's purely confession-based. And Judge Duffin said that, hey, throw this out, it's junk. So, guys, I think we all are very, very frustrated, especially in the case of Brendan. If I can ask the panel, tell me, do you think Brendan will ever be released? Panel, tell me, what do you think? Christy.
I have to believe he will. I have to believe he will.
Okay, that's your heart. What does your head say?
Not in a million years.
Yeah. Sammy.
Yeah, I was thinking that exact same thing. But I want to also believe that if they make a move that says he's never ever getting out, that there would be public outrage. I really, 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 really want that. This is really bad. It's a bad deal what happened. The fact that children like him, young people like him, are he was totally, completely victimized and ruined for life and punished. And he
Correct.
doesn't even to this day probably understand it all.
No, if you actually hear a lot of, he's done a few releases where he's written letters. He's still 16. Mentally, he's still 16. And I believe, I know this is going to sound funny, maybe even cruel, but luckily he doesn't really understand the big picture significance of it. Otherwise, he would be completely devastated. Yeah, it is an all-round tragedy. Jay Jacks, do you have any comments?
I think that if we look at how the courts view when somebody confesses, it's really almost stronger in many ways than DNA evidence, fingerprint evidence, everything. It just seems to kind of, it's actually, especially in some cases, they just want to take that and run with it. Other cases, it's, they investigate. But my head and my heart tell me that something else will happen to participate and he'll get out. That's what I see, because too much has come out just from this group of people, here, Reddit, wherever. Too much has been released, and I think something else is going to happen that's going to participate in getting him freed.
Yes, I agree. Thank you very much, Jay Jacks. Big Jeff, do you have a comment?
I very much concur with what Jay Jack said, and I my personal opinion, which I think he was kind of alluding to, is that Brendan's fate is very much tied to Stephen's at this point. It's hard to believe that Stephen could get out, and it's going to depend on the manner on which Stephen gets out. For example, if the jury finds that the various affidavits that Zellner has, indicate that there's sufficient reasonable doubt, then that's kind of going to be a tough thing for Brendan. But if there's evidentiary things, if someone has new things that's uncovered, it's going to be that new evidence that's going to help Brendan. Brendan's beyond the help of reasonable doubt at this point, but it's well within new evidence, and new evidence can include some of the things that Kathleen Zellner is bringing forward, the various affidavits that she has, including people like Travis Kroll that nobody talks about.
Yes. Thank you, Big Jeff. And look, I'm convinced that Kathleen Zellner's got a couple of aces up her sleeve. She's kept them close and not revealing anything until she's in front of a judge. Millbilly, do you have a comment?
I agree with everybody.
Okay. Maz. Yes, sorry, Millbilly.
Stephen's case is going to dictate what happens with Brendan.
Yep.
I agree.
Yep. Yes, I agree.
I hope so. I hope so. I cannot help it, and I'm so sorry, but I do get so emotional when it comes to Brendan.
Yes. Matt, do you have a comment?
Yeah, like all the other panel, basically. I'd like to see him be freed, but because of all this corruption, I know how high up it goes. Then I just hope and pray Kathleen has got something and can pull it off for Stephen. Then that gets Brendan out then as well.
Yes, we hope so. Yeah, I mean, both cases are complex. They interrelate. with each other, obviously, because we're talking about one victim here, and both Brendan and Stephen allegedly were together, and yet the state was clever enough to treat them as separate trials. So who knows how one will affect the other? Judge Duffin has already made the decision. Hey, release this kid. Bibi, do you have a comment?
I agree with Maz, and I really like to think that all this effort that everybody all over the world has put into this doesn't go in vain, and that somehow it manages to help them.
Yes, which remarkably dovetails in our last slide, and that's Stephen, and he, of course, he remains incarcerated, and I quote, and this is very sad. He's been in prison 28 of his 53 years and is ineligible for early release. And Ken Kratz, many times in his book, says he is where he belongs, and he's going to die in prison, right? And he says it all the time, that's precisely when, where he's going to stay. And, the last comment on the slide was that he's never going to give up. Well, Steve, I could tell you that I know that none of us from the panel, none of us in the audience, we're not going to give up too. And we're here to see that justice is done, because it not only affects you, but it affects everyone in society, especially if you're wrongfully convicted, and especially in your case, being wrongfully convicted twice. We've seen the devastation that it has not only personally caused you, Brendan, but also your respective families. No amount of money or compensation can undo that. But we all hope that Kathleen Zellner can be put in front of a judge and gets an evidentiary hearing. Well, look, guys, that's the end of our podcast series for MAM 1. We hope that you have enjoyed it. I have thoroughly enjoyed it. We've done, I think, 24 Coffee with Foul Plays, and we've had, I think, well over 24,000 views for our podcast, and that's fantastic. Our aim, of course, was to spread the message, to give a launching pad to our audience to further pursue specific aspects. And I like to personally thank the panel and everyone who's listening to the podcast. I'm going to be having a bit of a break, and I'm going to be working very hard on the case on MAM 2, but I should be back hopefully very, very soon. And I'd like to thank all the excellent support that everyone has given me putting together this excellent podcast. And remember, guys, if you like what we do, please subscribe. We're here as a result of you guys, okay? Our subscribers, our supporters. It doesn't matter whether you're a guilter or not. It makes no difference. We accept all type of theories, and we discuss them in a professional, congenial manner. We're non-judgmental, and that's the important thing. We try to be as accurate as possible. If we make a mistake, let us know. We'll try and correct it. Panel, thank you very much, guys. Are there any final comments? I can't believe we've actually finished the podcast, guys.
Right.
So, guys, any parting comments?
I'd like to make one, Dr. Silkman. I'd personally like to thank you. A lot of people don't realize how much work it is to sit down and prepare for a podcast of this length. We've done 24 podcasts. I don't think we've done many that are under 2 hours. Only a couple. Most of them are well over that, like this one.
Yes.
And you have done an excellent job. You're an excellent host. And I couldn't think of anybody that I would have rather have had in the lead doing this podcast than you. You really address it with a level head and with a lot of expertise. So everybody, thank you. It's common to have kind of a cast party after that something like that is finished.
Yeah.
But I'm going to hold up my wine glass and here's a toast to Dr.
Thank you,
Silkman.
guys.
To Dr. Silkman.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. And look, I've only really been involved in this case for about approaching a year now, and I want to thank all of you guys and our listeners. I'm very lucky in a way. We're all very lucky. We're a great team, and we work well together, and we all have our little niches of areas of expertise, and we come together like a family and a jigsaw puzzle, and hopefully it's been a good experience for everyone. I know I've enjoyed it. Bibi, do you have a comment?
Jeff, clink, said actor Silkman.
Clink.
Thank you.
Clink.
Thank you very much.
Classes clinky. Yeah.
Thank you. Christy.
Yeah.
Sorry, Bibi.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, and everybody enjoy your weekend.
Thank you, Bibi. Christy, do you have a comment?
I also want to say thank you to everybody. I'm really sad to see this series end. Tracy Bowman, we're not ending. We're just ending Making a Murderer 1. We will continue. We'll announce what we're going to do next while Silkman works on Making a Murderer 2. But next week we will just be having a general discussion of a recap of the entire series. So we'll discuss next week what is going to continue on for the next couple weeks while Dr. Silkman is on break. And Dr. Silkman, thank you. You did an excellent job putting this all together. I thoroughly enjoyed doing it with you. It was a blast. And one more.
That was good fun.
For those of you that missed it at the beginning of the podcast, keep an eye out. We will be releasing our new website very, very soon, where we have tried to link all of the YouTube channels together and have it just be like a one-stop shop to find everything you're looking for. Stephen Avery documents, pictures, the Discord channel, the links to the different YouTube channels. We're hoping it's shaping up beautifully. We're really excited about it, and I can't wait for everybody to see it. So watch out for that, please. And we'll see you soon.
Fantastic. And thank you also to all the guest researchers that we've had. Each guest researcher has brought something new and novel to the table. And remember, not everyone can be an expert at everything. And that's why we invite people to come on the show to give us their thoughts. And it's been marvelous. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Joe Jacks, do you have a comment?
Yeah, first, I'd just like everyone else, I'd like to thank you for all the work that you put into it. I know that it's been a lot. So you deserve a lot of credit for that, because it's not easy to prepare and get all of these things ready and, have an agenda and all that. Plus having, guests like me and, the others that have been on to work that in to give us a voice.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, I've been following this since literally days after the series aired, and I've stayed involved in it. And certainly I'm no expert. It's kind of made my head explode at times. I've had to step away, but I've never left it. But having this kind of outlet has been great, and I do appreciate the invite and letting me speak.
Yep, absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. I mean, in a way, guys, I was very fortunate in that I just retired from work, and this case is all about DNA, which is something that I've spent 30 years just about working in. So it's been awesome. But again, guys, along the journey, I've met some incredible, passionate people, and they're all here. They're all in this panel. And there are others as well who are doing their own separate things. But we're very lucky. We're very fortunate. We all go in the one direction, which is awesome. And remember, our ultimate aim is to get those boys released so they can hug their mamas and taste freedom. Because, if you haven't committed a crime, you shouldn't be sitting in a prison cell. And I believe that there's going to be a lot of good stuff coming out, especially if Kathleen Zellner can get in front of a judge. Oh boy, it'll be awesome. Okay, guys, thank you all so much, and we'll all catch you next week. As Christy said, it's more like a review. We're going to have just a short number of slides. We're going to review what we've covered in Man 1. Obi-Wan, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I wanted to thank you too. I want to thank you for the time that you spent on this case with and for each and every single one of us to bring like awareness and share with everyone. But it's time for you to enjoy your retirement, and take a break, and focus on yourself for a bit.
Yeah. No, that'll be awesome. I'm not disappearing, guys. I'll still be in the background, but I do need a little bit of a break, refresh, re-energize. Only be a couple of weeks, I promise. And my aim is to do MAM 2 and introduce a lot of the forensic evidence just to show the shenanigans that the state has done, and hopefully it'll be as well received as our Man 1 podcast. Thank you very much, guys. It's definitely time for me to get a coffee. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you.
Say thank you again, Dr. Silkman, and
Thank
everybody
you.
else.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been a Foul Play production.